Hello and welcome to Sacred Mindshift Circle. I'm your host, Dahlia Deborah Donald, and today we'll be discussing how our nutrition affects our emotional and spiritual well-being. Our guest is a health and wellness nutritionist and intuitive eating coach. She's the founder of her brand, Natural Nutrition, and creator of the Whole Health Awakening program, where she teaches others how to regulate their metabolism and prioritize their health. Let's give a warm welcome to Samantha Williams. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. So we're going to get into asking you about your personal story and how you were led into this healing path with nutrition. What made you interested in this field?
Well, I guess I've been interested in health all my life, really. I used to be a competitive swimmer when I was younger and a triathlete as a teenager. So health has always played a central role in my life, really. Both my parents are, very kind of pro healthy eating and everything like that when I was growing up. So so that just kind of started me off in that direction, I guess. And then I became a biology teacher, which took me to high schools, secondary schools in the UK. It's sort of all the way from 11 to 18. So I worked in those for 8 years in the UK, and then I went into international teaching. And just through the time that I was teaching, I just observed the differences between how children that have had breakfast and children that haven't had breakfast would perform in school. They're much more engaged. They're able to, have a better memory. The recall is better. They're more energetic, obviously, I guess over time I just thought I'd like to move into something a little bit more holistic. So I had some problems with my own like menstrual cycle because of my relationship with food when I was a bit older, and I basically wanted to find a way that was a natural way to rebalance my hormones. If anybody's ever had a hormonal imbalance, you'll know that you feel like out of your body, like you don't feel like connected to your body. It's a very strange sensation. And I just my periods had actually stopped at the time, so I sought help from like the traditional pharmaceutical route, but was just given a prescription really and nothing else, which I just felt really dissatisfied with, because I knew that the root cause of why I wasn't getting my periods was not because there was something wrong with my hormones. It was because there was something deeper that was wrong with my relationship with food and my relationship with my body as well. And so I sought help from an Ayurvedic doctor. So this comes from like the old Indian tradition. It's about 5,000 years old, and it's based around the composition of your body. So each individual has a different composition in their theory, and then they will give you, the doctor will sort of do a full assessment, not just of your diet, but of all areas of your life, your emotional state, exercise, all these kind of things. And then she gave me a plan, which was like a 2-week plan of foods to eat, which were there to balance my different elements of my body. And within 2 weeks of like following the plan that she gave me, my menstrual cycle came back. I was like really felt completely different. I felt suddenly like myself again. I'd felt really depressed and down and just didn't know why it was like that. And so once that everything balanced again, I was like, oh, that's why I've been feeling like that. And I just thought, like, it's such a simple thing. It's such a basic thing, nourishing your body from like whole foods, not even, no dieting, no kind of like cutting things out, but just eating whole foods that are helping to balance the body out. And I just wanted to share that message. I think it's such an important message. Back then I was looking a lot at, reading online things, and this message of like food is medicine was really kind of like, I was really drawn to it. I felt like this is my calling really. So I guess that was kind of the background really of why I got into nutrition. So that was when I decided to study a master's in nutrition. I was living in Bangkok at the time, actually in Thailand, and I moved back to the UK to study. So and then that was it really. So that started me on a new career pathway.
So as far as what you teach, explain a little bit about your program and what is intuitive eating? What would that entail?
Yeah, so my program is the Whole Health Awakening, and the reason why it's called that is because I combine science, because the foundation of what I've learned through my life is scientific. I've had an undergrad in biology and a master's in nutrition, so and there's so much evidence and research around nutrition and diet and things like that, and I find that really interesting. And I think also, in the Western world, a lot of people they won't necessarily believe something if it's not proven in science. And there's definitely a place for that, in my opinion. But it's also very much from my own journey of, having a bad relationship with my body and food, and then recovering from that. I understand the psychology is really, really important as well. So looking at understanding like the root cause of some of your behaviors, which usually come from conditioning, which is usually from childhood experiences, things that we perceive in the media, influence of parents and peer groups, and all these kind of things which condition our thoughts around food and nutrition and how we should nourish our bodies. And then there's the spirituality side of it as well for me, which is very much about, connecting with yourself, using your body as your guide. The body's wisdom is very, very strong. It's not affected by conditioning, whereas the mind's thoughts are affected by that. And so I think like the triad of those three things is really important, to have all of those to create sustainable change for people. Most people that I work with have tried dieting. I'm sure everybody that's listening to this has tried a diet sometime in their lives. I know I have. And one of the biggest problems with diets is that they're not designed to be long term. They're not sustainable. It's a very quick fix. It's like a big restriction, X number of calories, you're counting calories, or you're cutting out a whole food group or something that you can never stick to long term. So I wanted to create something that I could work with clients on for it's 3 months long. So that's the minimum time that I work with clients. And then they can go off for the rest of their lives, and they've got enough tools and strategies and understanding of not just their body, but also, the science of nutrition, what's happening in their body when they eat certain foods. And then the intuitive eating part really, I think, comes from the spirituality side, which is to relearn how to trust the body's signals. So in order to be able to do that, you have to develop a deep connection with your body. And, for me, meditation is a big part of that. Being able to kind of sit with yourself, listen to what is happening, not just in your head, but in your body as well, and take the opportunity to interpret some of those messages, and feel the body, like feel all parts of the body, not just kind of be in the head all the time, where we are most of the time. And just to be able to to learn to trust the body again. We're born with this innate ability to trust our bodies and know what we need. We lose that through our lives. Everything is there to distract us and disconnect us, not just from each other, but from ourselves as well, and from nature as well. And so intuitive eating really teaches you to identify those conditioning rules that you've kind of absorbed through your life around food and diet. What a healthy body shape looks like, for example. We all have this idea of the perfect body. Well, that actually doesn't exist. It's generated by the industry, the diet industry. And so intuitive eating really helps you to just unpick the conditioning and then replace that conditioning with new thoughts. And that takes time. That isn't something that you can just do like that. It takes, the theory is it takes 66 days to create a new habit. And that's consistently every day doing it. So this process of transformation from being a chronic dieter, which a lot of people I work with are, maybe they've got metabolic syndrome, which is a collection of symptoms like diabetes and obesity, or maybe they've just got a disordered relationship with food. Maybe they have very bad body image. All of these things are symptoms. In order to change the symptoms, we need to look at the root cause, and that's what my program is about. It's about the root cause and then changing those sort of behaviors and thought processes so that the symptom then naturally will heal itself.
Okay, well, that's very fascinating. And I've always heard also that the gut, what where the gut is our second brain. Have you ever noticed any spiritual, I guess, symptoms or physical symptoms that manifest because of an imbalance in the gut, either related to what people are eating or emotionally how they're feeling?
Oh God, absolutely. Yeah, I think, it's not just what I've noticed, it's what I also have read and also what I've, witnessed from other people as well. They say the gut is the second brain. I personally think it's the first brain. I think we often will feel things in the body before they come to here, but we might just not be aware of that. And, like I told you before, when I had a hormonal imbalance, that affected me emotionally. So I think a lot of the time we have this idea that the mind and the body are separate, but we're one whole thing. It's a whole organism. So whatever's going on in here is going to affect this as well. And in particular with the gut, because the gut is the place where we have this huge population of microorganisms, and those microorganisms are intrinsic to releasing specific chemicals, which are then formed into lots of different things like hormones, immune system cells, all sorts of like neurotransmitters, which are chemicals which send messages around the brain and the nervous system. And in particular, one that most people will have heard of, which is serotonin. So serotonin is the sort of happy hormone, it's labeled, and 90% of that is released in the gut. So if your gut microbiome is not able to process the right types of food and release these special chemicals, which then make serotonin, that is going to affect your mood and your feelings of well-being. So the type of food that the gut microbiome needs to be able to do this is fiber. So fiber is kind of the forgotten hero, I think, in a lot of people's diets. It's definitely becoming more prevalent now in a lot of nutritional kind of, articles and things. But, fiber is really such an essential nutrient. And when we were hunter-gatherers, we were mostly eating fiber. It was like what our bodies have kind of evolved to eat. And sadly, these days, most of our food is actually like all the fiber's been removed because the food's been so highly refined and processed. So the recommendation for fiber for a healthy gut microbiome is 30 plant foods a week. So that might sound like a lot initially, but if you break that down, what's a plant food? Well, a plant food is seeds, nuts, beans, pulses, things like lentils. It's fruits, it's vegetables, it's spices, it's herbs. So actually, you can easily get maybe 5 to 10 in one meal if you're using, a few spices, if you're using some beans and some vegetables, and then maybe you have some fruit as well. There's lots of ways that you can easily increase the amount of plant foods that your body is receiving every day. And so actually 30 a week is not that much if you think about it like that. But sadly, like I said, most people are eating a very highly processed diet. And this has become the norm. It's now, I think there's a statistic that, compared to 1980, we're now spending like 80% of our food budget in the UK on processed food. Whereas in 1981, it was something like, 30%. So it's gone up massively. And it's also gone up with the rise in obesity. These two things are kind of, they're going up together. And you can't say it's a direct cause, but it's certainly a massive contributing factor to the increase in health problems now, and mental health problems as well. This emotional side of the gut, it's certainly, I think that there's a lot in the increases in people having depression and anxiety. There's multiple contributing factors to that, but I definitely think that the gut has a huge role to play. And by healing the gut with getting the right nutrients, you can start to feel more positive and happier in your life. And if that foundation is there, then you will be able to better deal with the other things that are kind of maybe causing that as well.
Okay. And most of the time, who are the clients that come to you to ask for this kind of help? Are they mostly like young women who are suffering from like eating disorders, or older women? Who most of the time are your clients?
So a big range of people, I have to say. I mean, my partner always says to me, you know, pretty much everybody could potentially be one of your clients. You know, I think I sort of pitch myself as working with people over the age of 30. So most people over the age of 30 have, you know, potentially got either a symptom of something that is caused by diet, usually these days, which is quite sad, but it's also true. And so, you know, I work a lot with men and women. It just depends. So mostly women have an issue with their body image. They have issues around their, you know, their relationship with food. They're chronic dieters. You know, they've been trying to fit into this societal ideal of what a body shape looks like. You know, that actually can potentially cause quite a lot of metabolic imbalances in the body. You know, it can be extreme, and it can obviously be an eating disorder. And I just want to say, I'm not an eating disorder specialist, so I don't work with people who have eating disorders, but I do work with people that have disordered eating patterns, which is a different thing. So disordered eating is like, you know, waking up in the morning, skipping breakfast because you're late and you've got to get to a meeting, you know, grabbing a a pasty for lunch, and then, you know, getting a pizza for dinner, and no thought about your nutrition at all. You're just prioritizing everything else in your life over food. You're not actually thinking, well, what does my body need to be nourished today? Like, I know I've got an early meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to plan the night before to make sure that I can get a nourishing breakfast. Like, that kind of mentality is what I help and guide people towards. You know, most people that I work with have prioritized their careers, their families, their friends, like their social lives over their health. And you can only do that for so long. You know, your body is resilient, but eventually something is going to happen, and you're going to start getting symptoms of something, you know, whether that's a hormonal imbalance, bad skin, you know, low sex drive, you know, it could be diabetes, insulin resistance, diabetes. I work with a lot of people who've got type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, which is like pre-diabetes, and obesity. You know, a lot of people want to lose weight who've got into that kind of category. So, you know, I work with people who are worried that their behavior around food is affecting their children. You know, I work with mothers who know that they've had a disordered relationship with food in the past. Maybe they had an eating disorder when they were young, you know, as a teenager or in their 20s, and now they're in their 40s and 50s, and now they are seeing that their behavior is affecting their children, or their daughter is copying them, that kind of thing as well, which is really important to end that behavior, you know, that cycle. So I work a lot with a lot of men who are in their like 50s and 60s as well, who are in this category of metabolic syndrome. It's actually an area that I specialize in because I find it so interesting, and you can make huge change so quickly as well, because there's just key things to change in the diet, which will reduce inflammation and create massive amounts of healing in the body. So yeah, I work with a big cross section of people, but like I said at the beginning, there's always this underlying reason which is the same, which is that their relationship with their body and food is not healthy. So whether they are using food as restrictive, whether they're using food as comfort, it's all rooted in the same thing. It's all because of conditioning they've received from, you know, external places, things that have happened to them in their lives, and it's digging into that and then looking at their behavior, and then the symptoms, like I said before, will naturally sort themselves out over time.
Okay. And have you noticed that there is a relationship between food and sometimes how we feel about how much control we have over the things happening in our lives? What would you label that as? Would you label that as like emotional eating, or when they are restricting their diet in some way? Does that have to do more with control, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think usually, you know, with emotional eating, people are trying to distract themselves from a feeling or an emotion that is uncomfortable. You know, we've been taught to celebrate happiness and celebrate joy and celebrate, you know, all these great feelings, but we don't know how to process grief and sadness and loneliness, you know, and they are just as valid emotions as any of the others. You know, we've just kind of categorized them as good and bad, and that then means that if you're feeling like lonely, that's like, oh, I don't want to tell anyone because that's like something to be ashamed of. So people turn to food because food is a very easy, quick, you know, distraction, and it feels good. You know, it releases dopamine in the brain, which is the pleasure hormone, so it makes you feel better. And also we associate food and comfort from the moment we're born. You know, as soon as we're born, like, we get fed from the mother, whether that's a bottle or a nipple, or, you know, it's something going in the mouth, and that association we make very young, and that's sustained and reinforced all through our lives. So, you know, emotional eating is definitely a way of not so much that controlling. If you feel like you can't control the things outside of yourself, that is the one thing that you can control. You can control what food you're putting into your body. And, you know, you might feel like you're out of control if you're emotionally eating, but actually what you're trying to do is you're just trying to push down an emotion that is like trying to come up. By putting the food in, you're like pushing it down again. So yeah, and I think a restrictive kind of mindset is definitely again, it's the same thing. It's also, you know, I feel out of control in other areas of my life. You know, maybe something's happened that you couldn't control it. You know, things around us we don't have control over. So or maybe made you feel a certain way. So, you know, you don't want that feeling. You know, I feel left out, I feel rejected, you know, and then you maybe go into a spiral of like, I'm a bad person, you always get rejected, like nobody likes you, you know, all these kind of thoughts that start in the mind. You don't want to hear that. So you then go, well, I'm just going to like, I want to punish myself. It's a self-punishing thing. So you reject food. You go, I'm going to starve myself. I'm going to, like, you know, become this size. I need to be this weight or whatever. And that can also then be, you know, a way of just distraction, really. And it is definitely rooted in control. But as I sort of learned through my yoga teacher training, you know, control is an illusion anyway. It's quite a hard thing to grasp, but, you know, there's certain things that we do have control over, but there's a lot of things that we just don't. And if we can learn to let those things go and just deal with what's going on here, then that will really help to kind of start a process of change as well with that.
Okay. And what do you think about detoxing and fasting? That would be different in a different way versus being controlling or restricting your body as a punishment. What do you think about it from a perspective of health and also like spiritually?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So I actually used to work at a detox retreat center in Thailand. So I worked a lot with people who were coming to the center to do a very structured detox. And the detox was with fasting as well. And they would take certain supplements and things to just sustain levels in the body, but they would drink a mixture of bentonite clay and psyllium husk. So bentonite clay like actually extracts toxins, and then the psyllium is like a filler so that you don't feel as hungry. So, and they, you know, people would come with all sorts of reasons for doing that. One of the questions I would always ask is, have you ever had a history of an eating disorder? Because, you know, I know that if you're in that mindset, you might go and do something like that to lose weight. Whereas actually a detox isn't about weight loss, you know, it's about like reconnecting with your body. It's about the spiritual side of it as well. And it's also like removing the crutch of food. You know, like I was saying before, we use food as an emotional crutch and things. So if you remove that, it actually it forces you to sit with the emotion. You can't distract yourself because you've got nothing to distract yourself. So a lot of people, when they're going through this process, they like feel awful because they've gone, oh my God, I'm feeling this grief that I haven't processed, or, you know, I'm feeling joy, maybe, you know, some people feel great. It depends. And so the detox becomes, although it's physical in the beginning, and that's the intention behind it, it becomes a spiritual journey because it forces you to sit with the emotion. It forces you to process the emotion. You know, a lot of people will journal and things like that around that period of time. And you become very light, like you become energetically very light because your body's not digesting food, it's not having to use all the energy for processing. So it has more space to kind of like take the energy to other places, and it helps healing. So it does, you know, fasting does facilitate healing. It facilitates something called autophagy, which is the breakdown of like old cells that are no longer needed, and they're removed from the body. So you feel the sense of renewal when you go through a detox as well. So, and that, you know, like I said, it does become a spiritual thing, because it's then about this connection that you can then feel in the body, because you have no distractions anymore. There's nothing kind of stopping you from actually really connecting with what's happening inside you. I mean, this might sound really scary to some people, because they're like, oh my God, I really, whatever's in there, I don't want to know, kind of thing. But, you know, if you allow it to come out, then you can heal afterwards, and then you feel better. So it's that kind of process of, you know, allowing whatever's there to surface, but doing it in a space that is supported as well. You know, obviously there was me and other people there to do consultations with people and talk them through difficult phases. So, you know, I think that detoxing and fasting certainly has a place. I think anybody that's considering doing it should question themselves about their intention, like why do they want to do it? And if it's for weight loss, I would definitely advise against it, because a short-term fast for 6 days, 10 days is not going to make you lose weight long term. It might make you lose weight for 10 days or even 2 weeks, but you're going to put it back on, and it's likely that you'll put more on because you'll be more hungry if you just kind of starve yourself. So it's, yeah, and anybody with an eating disorder, I would definitely advise against it, or with a history of eating disorder, because it can trigger it again, that feeling of emptiness that is kind of like becomes addictive to people. Yeah, that can get triggered again. So yeah, it's a really great process, and I think it does have a place, but I think that the important question is, what is the intention behind it?
As always, the intention is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And what would you say to someone who they want to try to start eating better, but they just feel like they're not capable of doing it? Maybe they make excuses, or it could be also that they just feel, I don't know, in the UK, it might be the same thing, but there are places in the US, for example, where it costs more to buy an apple than like a burger. So how are there ways to still eat healthy and still try your best to put your health and your nutrition as a priority, even in circumstances where maybe it might be a little bit more expensive, or as well, you're just not feeling up to it? What would you say to someone?
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of help online now. You know, there's a lot of places where you can get free, you know, advice and things like that. At the end of the day, nobody's going to do it for you. You've got to do it yourself, and you've got to want to do it yourself as well. I've got a free course on my website, which I can give you the link for, that people can access. It's just like 4 little videos, and that can maybe just start the process for some people. I mean, I just want to talk about the money thing, because that's something that always comes up, this idea of like, it's more expensive to eat healthily. And, you know, I actually would say that's not the case. You know, if you know what foods to buy, and you know how to eat, how to prepare them, which is definitely part of the challenge for a lot of people, is lack of knowledge, then you can eat much more cheaply than buying things like burgers and stuff like that. And also that's very short-term thinking. So that's like, what I'm doing now, you're not thinking about the future. So what happens when you end up with needing like medication for 30 years of your life? Like, that's going to cost you way more than the extra like 50 cents or whatever it is to buy the apple instead of the burger. And, you know, buying the apple is not just the value of it financially, it's the value of it nutritionally, if you think about it in that way as well. You know, the nutritional content of that burger is going to be ingredients which are going to damage your body. They're going to damage your internal organs most of the time. Not all burgers, but I'm guessing you're talking about like fast food type burgers, which are full of ultra processed ingredients. You know, if you go into like a farm shop and you're buying like a natural burger and like a homemade bun and all that kind of stuff, burgers are fine. But there's a different kind of hierarchy. So, you know, do something today that your future self will thank you for. That's what I tell my clients. You don't have to make a massive change right now, but just do a little thing every day. I don't know if you know Regan Hillier. She's one of the manifestation queens, and she talks about the power of 2%. Like, just do something today, like a 2% change in your life, and do that every single day. A tiny little thing that's going to take you in the right direction. Whether that's watching a video on YouTube where a nutritionist is speaking about how to eat more plants, or whether it's like, this week I'm going to eat 2 new foods that I've never eaten before, 2 new vegetables that I've never eaten before. This week I'm going to learn 1 new recipe that is just plant-based, or I'm going to cook it from scratch. This week I'm only going to buy I don't know, like brown bread instead of white bread. You know, there's lots of little things that you can start to do that are going to give you, you know, a massive change straight away, because that feels overwhelming to most people. You know, if you think, oh my God, I want to lose 20 kilos, that's going to feel really overwhelming. But if you just think, I'm going to lose 2 pounds this week, that's a sustainable weight loss. You know, you can do that every week for the next 6 months. Then by the end of that 6-month period, you know, your body will have changed hugely. You know, we live in this world of instant gratification. We want it now. But with weight loss and health, that isn't how it works. Like, you've got to put the work in, and then it will come. Having said that, when I work with my clients who are overweight with diabetes and obesity, and I put them on the first week of my program is a detox. It's a detox with food. So it's naturally using foods which detox the body. They enhance the body's natural processes of detoxification. You know, the liver's always detoxifying you anyway. So if you give your body foods that enhance that process, that helps to make you feel better. And within 1 week, everybody that has done that has seen changes in their blood sugar control, in their body weight, in the levels of inflammation they have, in the pain in their body. Like, they see changes very quickly. So that is the sign that this is going to work, you know, this, and in just 7 days. So obviously, if people can afford to, they can work with a nutritionist. You know, they can find somebody like me that aligns with them, that they feel comfortable with, and, you know, who can help them in the way that they want as well. And yeah, if people can afford that, then do that. So there is a lot of help out there these days, for sure.
So would you say that just taking the initiative to change your nutrition just a bit, even if it's step by step, would be something that could, in the end, allow you to break a lot of cycles in your life and a lot of strongholds over you?
Yeah, I think so. I think there has to be, like I said, a multi kind of layered approach. You know, the food is just the symptom, you know, of something potentially deeper. So I think, you know, looking at what you grew up with. What patterns of behavior did you see as a child around food? You know, what are your kind of triggers in that? You know, what makes you think, I want to eat some cake, or I want to eat, you know, something, a tub of ice cream? You know, what is it that kind of triggers that, and why are you reaching for that? You know, start asking yourself, why am I doing this? You know, because if you're just doing it, you're just automatically doing it. Your subconscious mind is just running the show all the time. And it's a matter of bringing the subconscious into the conscious. So just by starting to observe yourself, that's the best way to do that, I would say. And yeah, identify patterns, journal every day. You know, at 4 o'clock today, I was craving chocolate. Does that happen the next day, and the next day, and the next day? Well, okay, what's the reason for that? What did you do in the morning? Did you eat breakfast or not? What did you eat for breakfast? Like, there's all these kind of questions that you can start to ask yourself and look for these patterns. You know, and also AI now, people can use AI to kind of help them, just to ask some questions about what could potentially be the reasons why I can't stop eating 3 chocolate bars at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it will give you like a whole load of reasons why. And some of them might be like, no. Oh, yeah, okay, maybe it's that. And it just starts you to become aware. Awareness is always the first step. And actually, taking responsibility is the first step. I have this acronym, RAINBOW, and R is for responsibility. Like R is the first thing. You have to take responsibility for yourself. Don't think that it's the healthcare system or the food system or diet culture. It's none of that. They don't care. The only person that actually cares about your health is you. So, responsibility is the first step. Then awareness of what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for speaking with me today. And be sure to check out the link to Samantha's page and her free course that's going to be also attached to the podcast. And remember to subscribe to sacredmindshift.com to always be up to date with the latest events and podcasts. Cool. Until the next time, God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.